afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Emily Winkler, and I'm the Meeting Systems Manager for the Equipment Leasing and Finance Association. On behalf of ELFA, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, The Next Chapter of Workplace Culture, What's Changed and What Matters Now. This session is being recorded, and it will be available to replay later this week. If you have a question for our speakers, please type it into the questions panel. We will address as many questions as time allows at the end of our content. And now I'm pleased to turn it over to my colleague, Ebony, to introduce herself and share a bit about today's webinar and background. Ebony, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emily. At ELFA, our people power groups, the Women's Subcommittee, Inclusion Subcommittee, and Emerging Leader Subcommittee are really at the heart of how we bring our commitment to people to life. These groups were created to open doors, build connections, and create real opportunities for growth and advancement across our industry. Through mentorship, storytelling, and intentional programming, they create spaces where members can learn from each other, share experiences, and feel a true sense of belonging. And today's panelists are a reflection of that impact. Each of them is a tremendous asset to our volunteer leadership and to the industry as a whole, helping to move this work forward in meaningful ways. They help us stay focused on what matters most, attracting, training, and retaining a strong, diverse pipeline of talent. And you'll see that energy in action at our Power of People Summit. So be sure to save the date for October 1st and 2nd in Nashville. It's an incredible opportunity to connect, learn, and engage with peers through conversation and sessions focused on leadership, culture, and inclusion, and the future of our workforce. Without further delay, I'll send it back to Debbie, one of our moderators for today's session. Please enjoy.
Thanks, Ebony. My name is Debbie Devassy Babu. I'm a shareholder at Darcy and Devassy, a law firm in Chicago, specializing in equipment transactions and litigation. Welcome again, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's conversation, The Next Chapter of Workplace Culture, What's Changed and What Matters Now. Workplace culture has always mattered, but the way that we think about culture, belonging, and employee experiences has evolved significantly over the years. Now, today, expectations are higher than ever. Employees are looking for meaningful experiences, fair access to opportunity, and leadership that truly listens. In this discussion, we're going to explore what's changed, what matters most right now, and how organizations can stay grounded in people-centered practices as they move forward. I'm joined today by my lovely co-host, Kinna. Kinna, great to have you and really looking forward to this conversation. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks, Debbie. I am as excited as you about this conversation today. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kinna Pattani, head of the Global Finance Practice at Alfa, and also the past chair of ELFA's Inclusion Committee. There are also so many perspectives in workplace culture right now, and we also have a great group of panelists joining us today, each bringing different perspectives. So instead of me introducing everyone, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourself, share your role and perspective, and the perspective that you're going to bring into the discussion. So let's start with you, Jim.
Okay, great. I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Wall. I am a senior sales manager at PEAC Solutions for the healthcare and fitness vertical. And I'm also this year's chair, so I'm following in some great footsteps from Kinna of the Inclusion Subcommittee of the ELFA.
Wonderful. I'll introduce myself next. I am Sarah Michael. I am with First American Equipment Finance, and I oversee our marketing and digital operations. I am also a proud member of the Women's Subcommittee for the ELFA, new member this year, and it's been a great experience so far.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm Vicky Edwards. I am the Chief People Officer at Alfa Financial Software. I have been with the organisation for 6 years now and have responsibility for all things people and culture across our global organisation.
That's great. Thank you very much, our panelists. Really looking forward again to that conversation today. I'm going to kick us off with our first question. So from your vantage point, what is the biggest change you've seen in how organizations think about culture and belonging. So I'll start with you, Vicky.
Yeah, sure. So one of the biggest impacts for me has been the move from office to hybrid working. I know that was forced for many at the beginning of the pandemic. And at that point, there was an intense focus on culture and connections now that people were not all in the same place. But now that people have gone back to the office, we've got hybrid working as a more normalized way of working. I think companies have had to think much more intentionally about how they define the culture, how to ensure inclusion, rather than just relying on osmosis due to the proximity of working. So I think that's brought more deliberate practices. We've had to look at distributed leadership, meeting participation, equalising that, deliberately setting aside time for collaboration days of bringing people together that aren't ordinarily together day to day. In many ways, as a global organisation, really benefited from this more deliberate thinking, as it's brought into focus the need to equal the playing field for regional operations. And I know from personal experience, our regional offices during our forced working from home really felt that they were much more part of the organisation, and everything wasn't kind of dictated to from head office. So they really valued that equal experience across the globe, and I think that that is something that we have tried really hard to hold on to as we've gone back to a hybrid way of working.
That's really great. I mean, I'm definitely one of those people that benefited from being out here in the US and stuck during COVID. So no, absolutely, totally agree, Vicky. It's been great. Sarah, how about you?
My first thought when I think about just the whole topic of how culture has changed is really who is defining it. I think years ago, just in business as a whole, it was something that was maybe more a directive that came from the top of the house, where now we look at it in a very different way. And that's that culture is co-created by every single individual who is part of the business. Organizations are also recognizing that I think that the more that culture includes that sense of belonging and inclusion, they're starting to see that go hand in hand with business results. And I guess related thought is just the role of that psychological safety when you're defining that culture. Those are words that a number of years ago, I had never heard those words. And it sort of gives you that way to think about how do you make people come to work that day and feel completely themselves and able to share their ideas and do that in a way that is free from judgment. So I think that we're just thinking much more deeply about making people comfortable within the workplace, because it really does bring about the best for those individuals and for the business.
Great. Jim?
So I would have to say the biggest change that we've seen is the entry of Gen Z into the workforce. And so Ebony started out in her introduction saying that the ELFA's current strategy is attract, train, retain, as it pertains to this next generation of equipment finance professionals. So how do you attract Gen Z to our industry? We know it's lucrative and a rewarding profession. I always say, if you like math and you like people, this industry is for you. But Gen Z is looking for more. They're looking for representation. They want to see that there's reward and career growth when you put in the hard work. They tend to prioritize purpose over paycheck. They look for a culture where belonging and transparency tends to be more valuable than your traditional perks. Inclusion is non-negotiable for them, so that has to be included. And so to end, how do we create and maintain these environments environments, that's really the challenge right now.
Thank you all for that perspective. There's a lot to delve into further. What we're hearing is that there's a real shift in culture from being something that's defined at the top of the house, senior, leadership, to something that's more shared, more closely tied to employees, to people, that how they actually experience work day to day. So there's this clear thread around expectations, whether it's transparency, inclusion, or creating environments where people feel safe to contribute and grow. So let's delve a bit deeper into that. The expectations around workplace culture seem higher than ever, and organizations are trying to keep up with that expectation. So let's start with Vicky. How have you managed culture across global teams and distributed workforces to change the way companies think about belonging? And do you find that expectations are different across different regions, countries, cultures?
Yes, so definitely yes to the latter question about expectations being different across regions and cultures. But I think if I look at global culture or culture of global organizations, it goes a little bit back to what I talked about earlier. I think belonging used to be anchored in the physical office and local rituals. And now there is more of that virtual approach, the leadership that Sarah and Jim have talked about, and creating the right environment for people to, build a genuine connection within their teams. So the role of the team and the manager are much more important now in creating that sense of belonging than perhaps it has been in the past, as Sarah said, no longer a sort of a top down. It's much more about the people that you are around day to day. What kind of signals that you belong here is culturally coded. So expectations are different across the regions, and it's not a one size fits all. You have to be much more conscious about the variety of ways that people are working, the different expectations they have of work, the different ways that they want to be supported and engaged, and that's all. It's different for different people, so making sure that you've got some common thread across the organisation that helps kind of keep people on the right track, but providing a lot of local ability to embed that in a way that works for them is really important. So that not one size fits all approach. So yes, I think definitely different expectations, but as a global organization, we have, some common expectations that we want to see that makes it feel like this is an Alpha organization. These are the things that are important to us and core to us, and how those are brought to life looks different in different parts of our organization.
Jim, you've been part of the Inclusion Committee at ELFA for over a year, and you're now our current chair. Congratulations once again.
Thank you.
At your company, in addition to your primary role, which you talked about, you're also starting to lead initiatives for inclusion this year. Definitely a big task that you've taken on there. What did you observe when you stepped into those responsibilities about where your organization was on inclusion and culture?
Sure. Thanks, Kinna. So I would say my company has always valued inclusion, but we're taking an intentional approach to expanding our efforts in 2026. For instance, we have a group called the Culture Club. Their primary focus is to cultivate high trust and a people-centered culture. We do this through consistent communication, recognition strategies, community building practices. Obviously, an important part of all of this is inclusion efforts, which I'm leading this year. So the first question you ask is, where do you start, right? There are quick wins, such as recognizing select employees on social media for Black History Month and Women's History Month. This makes a visible internal and external commitment to diversity. In fact, an employee recently commented that she was so fortunate to work for a place that fostered these discussions online. Another quick win is supporting a local Black-owned business for our month-end lunch in February. But then there's the activities that require more thought and time, such as starting ERGs, which we're starting to do this year. We started with an employee survey. Is this something that's interesting to you? Is it valuable to you? If so, what groups would interest you? You know, our goal was really to make the inclusion tent as wide as possible. So varying options in this survey were, yeah, your traditional ERG groups, such as a women's group and an LGBTQIA plus group. But other offerings were for remote employees, Gen Z, new parents, veterans. I truly believe that some of the stigma around inclusion is that some people felt excluded. So our intention is to provide education that inclusion is for everyone. I really believe that. The most popular ERG offered, for example, was a mental health group. And Vicky, I'm going to give a shout out to Alfa from being the chair of the inclusion subcommittee of the ELFA. I spoke with an employee at your company. In fact, I believe that he's on today's call in the audience, Sam Fairhurst, since Alfa has always excelled for a long time at having a mental health group for several years. He gave me really good advice, best format for a meeting, as well as a fantastic idea that members of your mental health group enrolled in an online course for a day to be kind of first responders for mental health emergencies, to recognize situations and to know just the right person to call in a crisis. In my opinion, and hats off to you, this is a best in class practice for a culture where employees truly, and with training, you look out for each other. All of these initiatives that I'm talking about align with PEAC earning and maintaining a Great Places to Work certification. And I guess the bottom line to all of this is it's never too late to start. We are just launching ERGs this year. So you can start even slowly fostering an environment of belonging at your organization. So if you've been looking for a sign, well, maybe this is it.
That's great. Thank you. And Sarah, let me bring you in over here. I'm kind of keen to hear your perspective from a North American financial services organization. How are employee expectations around culture and leadership evolving?
Yeah, I first to even comment to Jim's comment, it is a work in process, and I think it will always be a work in process, and that's the right way to view it. But two things come to mind for me, and those are that sense of community. Jim touched on a couple of those items. So when you think about fostering that sense of community, employees really want to have ways to authentically connect with colleagues that they spend a ton of their life with and a ton of time interacting with. So things like life stages, professional identities, their purpose, their interests. There's a million different ways to slice that, but really looking at that intersectionality and ways to create and foster those common connections, and having employers play a role in that. It's not just up to a group of colleagues to, schedule a happy hour after work. There's a lot that the employer can do to help foster those connections. And then when I think of values, that's probably the other piece that's really important, and that's that we see prospective employees and current employees, it's really important for them to have an understanding of the company values and feel like those company values align well with their own personal values, which makes sense, right? Because you want to be able to be who you are and show up as who you are when you come to work. So that alignment helps to foster that connection. When I think about kind of expectations in terms of leadership within the industry, I think colleagues really expect leaders to initiate and normalize conversations around topics that might be otherwise difficult to have. So they're inviting feedback and receiving that openly, even if that feedback might be difficult to hear, and then acting on it very transparently. I think that transparency is huge in terms of building that trust with colleagues today.
That's it's been really interesting to hear all three of you. What really stands out is how much intentional culture has become We've kind of moved from culture being anchored in those physical spaces and traditions to something that's more actively created through leadership behaviors, flexibility, and how people connect day to day. And there's also this important balance coming through between having shared values and allowing sort of local relevance and individual experiences. So that was really interesting to hear too. So with that all in mind, let's shift to what organizations are really focusing on now. And because the question isn't about just what culture is, it's how to make it real. So how do we move beyond policies and intention to something people can actually feel and experience in their everyday work? So Jim, let's start with you over here, because you shared some really nice practical examples around onboarding managed behavior, like this creating connection. From your perspective, what practices help employees feel they belong, and not just in the policies and on paper, as I was describing earlier?
Yeah, sure. I would say it's several things, and it all starts really with the first impression. So a member of the culture club that I described spends time with new employees within their first month with us. We do a wellness check. We go over all the ways that they can get involved at the company if they want to. Managers perform 45 and 90-day check-ins. And an important ingredient is the manager driving culture, right? Yes, you have the clubs, and yes, you have senior leadership support for belonging, but you have to get granular with it. It can be something so small, such as setting an example, smiling, saying hello to someone in a hallway, whether you know them or not. Managers need to create a culture where employees feel, as Sarah said, psychologically safe, where they feel their work's valued, and where they feel we're working together. And by doing so, we're unstoppable in hitting our goals. You also want activities that, encourage different departments to commingle. You want remote engagement, as Vicky's talked about a lot. So, for example, we do Walk It Out Wednesdays, where if you're on site, you get a chance to stretch and refresh with employees from all over the company. And if you're remote, well, you do it virtually. But we encourage people both on site and remote to snap a picture so that we can put it on the hub. And this keeps us all bonded. Regular trivia contests. I happen to be resident trivia master at our company. Keeps departments and remote employees connected as one. Our president sends out a weekly newsletter highlighting wins and achievements of activities, keep us connected, motivated, positive.
Thank you, Jim. Sarah, in your organization, what practical actions can help create a culture where people feel heard and valued? Psychological safety, as Jim so aptly put it.
Yeah, I think a learning mindset is really important. And what that means to me is approaching conversations with curiosity and not judgment. So how do you put that into action? I think it's really grounded in just asking a lot of clarifying questions. Even if you don't agree with an initial idea that is presented, you want to better understand it so that colleague is encouraged to continue developing the idea, and you can help serve as that coach by asking those questions. So you can think about what might the adverse impacts of this solution you're proposing be, or have you thought of alternative solutions that might be considered? What do those look like? Just really talking it out to help shape the idea with them and leave that ownership with them, I think results in the colleague leaving that conversation probably with new, fresh perspective that they really feel ownership over. So that learning mindset is important. And I think even that action is a great way to role model, which is crucial in any business, right? Because it's not about avoiding adversity. It's you can certainly have a contradicting opinion to someone else's proposal, but you want to role model how to talk about that and how to give feedback to one another constructively. when you think about, I think about this, the concept of 360-degree feedback, which I'm sure most of us have been part of and learned about. And I actually was reflecting, like, how can we even take that 360-degree feedback piece and turn it into 360 degrees of recognition? Because it's not even that constructive feedback that helps colleagues grow, it's also that feedback that gives them confidence and lifts them up. And I think that encouraging that from all directions within the organization is an important way to make sure that people feel valued for their contributions.
Thank you, Sarah. Vicky, you had talked about sort of making sure Alfa has a cohesive culture, yet at the same time stay locally relevant. How do you strike that balance in such a large global organization?
A combination of probably two things that we've already touched on. A common set of global values. So as Sarah said, having those values and being clear and intentional about them, and then empowering employees to inform what the local application looks like. So we have a very strong set of values that translates across everything we do. And I see these coming up in day-to-day life. I see them called out, I see them recognized and celebrated. And that's really important, that everybody has a common kind of set of a true north, I suppose, if you put it like that. But our values also empower our colleagues to make us better, to raise areas where we could or should be better in a way that's respectful. So our ERGs that Jim talked about earlier, it has led us to a very strong employee-led culture. They're a really key part of the culture of Alfa. And those ERGs, which we call communities, raise awareness, promote allyship, but they also work with leadership, regional leadership, and the people and culture team to inform policies and to drive initiatives and to make change for the better. So there is an empowerment there for employees to say, you know what, this is great, but it could be better. And here's how I think it could be better. Is there a conversation that we can have? And that helps to keep that culture not just at the leadership or in the people and culture team, but something that everybody wants to make better and to protect. And those local teams then setting direction for, you know, how that is implemented and the things that are important to them. So as an example, we have regular company meetings and conferences regionally each year. Now our US operation is now, we've got more remote colleagues than we have office-based. So the approach for the company updates for the US and the meetings and the conference content needs to be different than it is in, say, our EMEA region, where we have more people getting together more regularly. So we have some non-negotiables, which is about getting together, and being together is really important to Alfa and to the culture of Alfa. But what that looks like when the US team to get together and the content that they talk about and the activities that they do has got to be relevant to what's important to them at that point in time, and the messaging and the activities and all the messages that they're hearing need to address that particular audience at the time. So it's very specific. So the non-negotiables are, we need people to get together and we need them to have meaningful connections and have fun and hear some business content. But what that looks like in each region is different depending on what's needed. And a lot of our communities and our regional leadership inform what that content looks like. So I think it's probably the same as it is in organizations that aren't global, but it is about that communication, engagement, and creating that environment where people feel safe to say this isn't quite working for me, or I think we can do better, and knowing that someone's going to listen and do something about it, I think is the most important.
Thank you, Vicky. So we've talked a lot about how culture is evolving and what matters most, but as we all know, the term culture can feel very abstract until you actually see it in action. So I'd love to get some real world examples from you all in terms of what your organization does or is planning to do where cultural inclusion has a meaningful impact. You know, what has really resonated with employees or changed their experience in a tangible way. Sarah, why don't we start with you?
Yes, to Vicky's point that she was just making, really taking the time to understand the unique challenges of a particular group of colleagues and what they're faced with, and then finding ways to help remove those obstacles is important. And one of the best ways you can do that is to empower and give the autonomy to the groups, like the ERGs within the organization, to do that. So that brings me to one of my first examples. At First American, we have a Women in Business ERG that does amazing work. And just one small thing they did was understand the challenges of traveling mothers with babies, right? Especially in an industry where we would love more women to go into sales, but sales requires a lot of travel typically. So we found that these mothers were being challenged and they had to toss their milk down the drain. And so we employed a service covered by the company, and it's called Milk Stork for anyone who is curious. But that way, when breastfeeding mothers travel, they can ship their milk back home and not have to leave it behind. So that's one really neat thing we've done. And the second, I will credit our inclusion and belonging team with at First American. This was a very fun exercise they conducted. They across our whole organization, they assigned random groups, small groups of colleagues, and did an exercise around uncommon commonalities. And they set it up as a challenge. So they assembled those small groups and then tasked them with figuring out through discussion what is the most uncommon commonality among that group of individuals. So you can imagine those discussions were really entertaining. I really enjoyed being part of them. And then of course the group with the most uncommon commonality wins. It's just a great way to connect people across departments, across tenures, and give them a really interesting topic to talk about.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, the second one sounds like a really good icebreaker to really have people open up to each other. And the first one, hats off to you guys for thinking about that, for finding a service that would, you know, have the milk shipped back home, et cetera. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Vicky, would you like to go next and give us some real world examples?
It's a bit hard to follow that Sarah's examples. I really like both of them. For me, so one of the things that we have introduced are cultural days. So we recognise that as we grew and became more diverse globally, that the public holidays in each of our regions weren't necessarily meeting everybody's needs. So we designated some of those public holidays cultural days, with the idea being that you could exchange it for a day off on a date that was more meaningful to you, or to celebrate something that was more important to you. So each of our regions chooses the days that are designated cultural days, and then the individuals choose when they want to take those additional days. So recognizing that belonging isn't just about the company you work for and the country that you're working in, but recognizes that you have individual things that you might want to be celebrating. So that was a really simple thing that we did that has had a big impact. And I think the first year everybody was a little bit ingrained into taking the usual public holidays, but it's been in place now for maybe 3 or 4 years, and we're seeing lots of people now swapping those days and taking days that are meaningful to them. So that was something that I think has had a positive impact.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm sure the employees really appreciate the flexibility and allowing you to do that. Jim, how about you? What is your organization doing in terms of real world concrete examples?
So I'm going to follow all this excellent content by talking about soft pretzels.
Which are delicious, so it makes sense. Yeah.
I'm sincere about it. I really believe that it is the little things that create meaningful moments. And so something as simple as soft pretzels in the office on Tuesday, everybody loves a warm soft pretzel. So when they first arrive, well, it draws a crowd. And this offers a setting where people from different departments can connect. You can say hello to someone that you might not have seen during the day otherwise. And another example is chair yoga on Thursdays. I'm missing it now by being here, but this is a worthwhile investment. If you're on site, we gather in a large training room. And if you're remote, again, with remote engagement, you join the class via Teams. So not only does that connect us all, but it also is just good for our mental health. It provides a clearing just to pause and reset. And sometimes that is so very needed.
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate you skipping chair yoga to join us today. So,
and for the ELFA.
So we're going to pause for 1 sec to take questions from the audience. So we have one. This is for everyone, anyone who wants to jump in to answer. Beyond committees and summits, what is the ELFA doing to ensure more representation in leadership and speaker panels and in marketing so that someone from an underrepresented group can actually see themselves in the industry? As Jim noted earlier, Gen Z.
So I can start with that, and I can speak from a lens of the people power groups. I don't know if Ebony is still with us or not and can go past that, or if not, I'll try to answer it sufficiently on my end. We are just starting to plan the Power of People conference that Ebony mentioned at the start of our call. It includes the Inclusion Subcommittee, the Women's Subcommittee, and the Emerging Talent Subcommittee. And a big focus on that, and our first call was, all right, what are the topics that we want to cover, and who do we want to speak and represent these topics? And having diversity in those speakers is top of the list for us. So I can assure you, as it pertains to the Power of People conference, that's something that we're very aware of and will deliver on as well. As far as leadership within individual companies, it's something that we try to tackle within the Inclusion Subcommittee as far as constructive conversations when we get together and meet. Do you have diversity at your company? How is Gen Z represented at your company? What are some challenges? What's a woman at your company that inspires you? These are the kinds of roundtable conversations that we have to try to foster that. Ultimately, it comes down to what each individual company is going to embrace and hire. But I promise you, we advocate for it at the industry level.
I will chime in on an internal ELFA discussion side of it, because that is a really good question.
Yeah.
And something we have a lot of conversation about is how do we have more intentionality behind our speaker selection process to ensure that we have representation regardless of background, gender, just ensuring that across the board that we feel like our panels and our speakers reflect what our country looks like and provide that diverse sense of perspective and thought and industry sect that we really want to ensure that our audience leaves that feeling like they are connected to our message and connected to the industry. And so we have had really candid conversations about that as we continue to move forward, as we're selecting panelists, as we are selecting speakers, not only with our Power of People Summit, but also some of our larger events like convention, where we are looking at a slate of applicants who want to speak on related topics. And it has given us time to be intentional, but also pause and say, hey, are these the right people that we're putting up on this panel, or the right people that we have speaking on these related topics that really will cover the variety of people that are going to be in the room, so that we are representing just the broad topics and generational experience across all industry sectors, and any of those conversations that we're having and any of the people that are speaking. And so we'll continue to have those. And I think it's something that we have increased heightened awareness about, that we need to continue to focus there on making sure that our speakers reflect the diversity of our industry. So it's something that we'll continue to focus on and pay attention to as we keep moving forward.
I'll just add, as a newer member of the Women's Subcommittee, I've been really impressed by how much the team focuses on actually increasing diversity within the industry, which I think is the starting point to making sure we have all perspectives represented. So the ELFA is really focused on reaching out to universities and schools across the country to get engagement, create awareness around the industry, and help students see themselves as someone who could be very successful in the equipment finance space in the future.
Thank you all. That was really interesting to hear the different perspectives and what's going on at ELFA to bring more of a diverse workforce and speakers. So thank you all for those real world examples of what you're doing in your organizations. It sounds like what a lot of this comes down to is being intentional. I think I heard that word more than once today, and how these intentional everyday actions can shape how people experience culture. So we've talked about what's changed, what you all are doing and different organizations are doing today. So let's look forward. If we're really here to talk about what's the next chapter of workplace culture, what do you think the future looks like? And what do you think will define workplace culture in the next few years? Vicky, I'm going to start with you since you work with global teams. What trends will shape the next phase of workplace culture, in your opinion?
I'm going to say AI, and I know we've done 40 minutes and not mentioned it so far today, so that's
a miracle.
That's an achievement. Yeah. It is a miracle, yeah. But I think AI is inevitably going to have an impact on culture. Adoption of AI isn't just a technology decision; it is a cultural one as well. And at a point when employees are wanting more human connection, not less, I think AI is going to, well, it's here already, isn't it? Starting to help us look at how we can be more productive and efficient and interact less, which is not necessarily what we're looking for. I think if companies lean too far into the efficiency gains that we will get with AI, we risk eroding the culture that is so important to people and is the thing that keeps people at organizations. So I think how it's viewed culturally hinges on whether employees see it as something that's going to expand their capability and help them, or going to threaten their role. And companies who can invest in helping employees use AI effectively for expanding their capability and giving them more meaningful work, I think are going to win out on this battle or this tension between that and the human connection that people are craving. So I think it's important that we introduce it and use it in our organizations in a way that supports employee growth, and that way we will protect and strengthen our culture, not erode it unintentionally.
Thank you, Vicky.
Great. I mean, Sarah, maybe if I can bring you in, because I think one of the questions that I had, interestingly, in some way lines up with another audience question we have. So I'm going to go with my question and see if I can add a little bit of what's in that question, if I may. So I'll read out the question first, and then maybe I'll ask my question. So the question was, Jim touched on disengagement from inclusion efforts. They're asking for us to say a little bit more here, but why do well-intentioned culture initiatives often coexist with employee disengagement, and what does that say about how leadership shows up day to day? I feel that authenticity matters, especially with the more younger generation. So my question is going to be, how can organizations stay authentic and people-centered? So how do we stop ourselves from getting that disengagement?
Yeah, so I think what I hear from the question is you can create a bunch of different groups and ways for people to connect, but some people are still not going to feel that connection. And I think that is where being intentional about fostering those individual human to human relationships is so important. We all, I'm sure, get caught up in the day to day, and it's like, I got to check another thing off my list. I got to respond to this urgent email. But can we take the time when we are in a moment of free space, even if it's just a moment, to ask someone else how they're doing? I think it's those genuine relationships that even are outside of those more organized efforts that help bring in and make those other individuals feel included. But that's sort of a cultural thing, right? So really focusing on that high level perspective of values of the organization, and making sure that colleagues are encouraged to connect with one another at that level. It's not just about getting as much done as possible. The human element of it is really important.
That's great, Sarah. I totally agree. And Jim, it'd be great if I could get your perspective. What if we look ahead? What is next for ELFA's Inclusion Committee? Because we're really focused on bringing a lot of this to life, bringing awareness. So, what's next for ELFA's Inclusion Committee?
Sure. So a little bit of background about us and the Inclusion Committee. We really believe, and it comes back to the audience question too, education, knowledge. You know, I do believe that inclusion is for everyone. That education is needed. It needs to come down from senior management. So the committee itself, we believe that this knowledge, this education is the catalyst for change back to a more inclusive industry, a more inclusive workplace environment. We try to do this by delivering impactful educational opportunities, practical resources. By doing this, we feel that we're equipping members of our industry to foster inclusive workplaces, strengthen the industry's culture, and build a more innovative but also representative community. And again, I'm going to bring things all full circle with us. On the attract end of things, well, it's anywhere from campus to career presentations and scholarships to industry conferences like we talked a lot about today that introduce students and emerging talent to career pathways in our industry. We profile a pipeline of various voices in our industry, and that optically tells a story of diverse professionals in equipment finance. And this all broadens awareness of the career opportunities that are out there in management roles, which again adds to representation in our industry. On the train end of things, well, it's conversations like this, right, that we're having today. It's podcasts, it's spotlights that deliver high impact sessions addressing emerging trends and actionable inclusion strategies. And then on the retain side of things, well, we do this again by sharing tips and trends on creating cultures of belonging. Again, kind of like what we're doing today. We also are developing a recognition program. So this is new for companies or individuals that advance inclusion. And this signals that inclusive leadership is valued. Retention also happens through the conferences we talked about, which include where we elevate inclusion-focused learning. And again, with the Power of People Summit, and I promise this will be my last plug for the summit, we host panels, workshops, discussions that foster engagement, foster inclusion, and skill building. So this year's conference, it's in Nashville. It's October 1st and 2nd. If any of the things that we talked about today interest you, if you want to build on this, if you want to make more connections in the industry, please plan on attending. I promise you it will be worth your time.
Thank you, Jim. Question for the group. What is the one thing on your to-do list in this space right now?
I don't mind going first. So top of my list is a culture playbook. So we are curating a playbook that brings to life our culture so we can be more intentional about the aspects of it that are really important to us and focus on the areas where we need to do better. But we're co-curating this with all of our colleagues. So this isn't an HR or a leadership initiative. We're not locking ourselves in a room and writing down what the culture should look like. We are working it through chapter by chapter, going out to the business, getting people involved in helping us to write that. So it's a shared responsibility across all of our 535 colleagues to kind of bring it to life, so that we've got something that really says intentionally what is our culture, what are the things that are important to us. So we've got that written down.
Thank you.
I can take it from here. Probably two things. One is sponsorship. I have recently in my career just started to think a lot about, I've been in the industry for 18 years, about the role that I can play. And I've even been thinking of where can I give up the stage and give someone else a chance to be in the spotlight? Where can I elevate someone else's voice or idea in a room? And sort of really thinking about almost the legacy of my career and supporting others in that way. I care a lot about women in business in general, and First American I'm very proud we're a gender balanced organization, which is really neat. And so now I'm super excited to be part of the more of the happenings in the ELFA to help make an impact there as well, and kind of cascade that out industry wide.
Thank you, Sarah. That's awesome. Jim?
And I'll round it out. Top of my list, definitely getting the ERG started this month, the employee resource groups. We recently had an ERG leader kickoff meeting to discuss, agenda format, what we want the ERGs to look like, and what we want them to accomplish. We're looking for a balance with the content of our ERGs. If it's only social, then the movement fades, as one of the audience questions was about. But if it's only career focused, well, then it feels transactional. So it's got to be a balance. And I'm just so excited to include ERGs in our already inclusive culture.
That's awesome, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really been awesome. It's amazing how time flies. We kind of coming towards the end. So I'd like to know, this has been a really thoughtful conversation, and I really want to thank all of you for sharing your perspectives. Vicky, I know it's quite late for you in the UK, and you're on vacation, so definitely thank you to you for joining us. What's really stood out is while workplace culture continues to evolve, at its core, it hasn't changed. It's still all about people. It's about how individuals feel, how they are supported, and whether they truly have the opportunity to contribute and grow. What has changed is the level of intention required. So culture isn't something that just happens anymore. It's something that organizations, leaders have to actively shape, listen to, and continue to evolve. Whether you're a global organization or smaller, the more closely connected teams, the more common thread is kind of clear over here. What I've got from all the conversation is leadership, trust, meaningful everyday actions, including the soft pretzels. I haven't had a soft pretzel, Jim, but I'm going to have a soft pretzel now. Sure. And those are the things that are what brings culture to life. Again, I want to thank Debbie for co-hosting this with me, and Ebony for helping us stay organized. And thank you once again to our panelists, Jim, Sarah, and Vicky. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining. Just a reminder, this was recorded and it'll be available to replay later on the ELFA website. You'll also receive a short survey after we end. Please take a moment to share your feedback, as it helps us shape future webinars. So thank you all so much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.